Shortly before midnight, a middle-aged woman walked into the Seoul Jungnang Police Station. She told the officer on duty that her daughter was missing. Her 14-year-old daughter, pseudonym Hayun, had gone to see a friend earlier that day and had not come home. Her mother also said her phone had been turned off. Hayun was reported missing at 11 p.m. on September 30th, 2017. She had told her mother she was going to have a reunion with an elementary school classmate that morning, and around 12:30 p.m., shortly after she had left home, she texted her mom asking if she could go to a DVD bang, which is a movie and entertainment room. Her mother, knowing that places like these can be seedier and unsupervised, told her daughter she couldn't go. Hayun responded like a typical teenager. "You don't let me go anywhere, Mom." Hayun hung up the phone, and that was the last her mother would ever hear from Hayun. Welcome to Korean True Crime, with me, your host, Mimi Mizuko. Thank you to Vix Mack, Lala, Ben Jones, William White, G1 Edwards, Nico, Elijah Hancock, Anomanam, Dr. Bob, My96, Lumos, Emma Brown, David Tafoya, Adriana, and Pip for your support on Patreon. Today's episode is a requested revisit of a case that I covered very shallowly in 2021. I hope that I can do this case more justice. If you would like to join my patrons vote on future episode topics and hear episodes first with ad-free early access. Thank you to my patrons for making this show possible. Warning, today's episode contains accounts of sexual assault of minors, suicide, and torture. Listener discretion is advised.
What was that?
Hayun's cell phone was switched off around the Mangwoo intersection in Jungnang area of Seoul, marking the last known location where search efforts were concentrated to locate her. It wasn't until 2 days later that the police investigation actually began for the search of Hayun on October 2nd, 2017. The police used CCTV to find that she was last seen at an apartment complex in the Mangwoo area. Hayun was seen walking towards a villa. By analyzing the footage, the police watched Hayun enter the building at 12:20 p.m. with another girl her age and never come back out again. This was the only entrance to the villa, so it wasn't possible for her to have gone out a back entrance easily. There were a few families that lived in this villa, and they didn't have a warrant for all of the apartments, so they continued to review the footage hoping to learn something else about where Hayun went or which apartment she could be in. The other girl was seen leaving the apartment building a few hours later at 3:40 p.m. without Hayun. Then, the police saw something incredibly suspicious from the footage the day prior, October 1st, 2017. They saw a man come out of the apartment dragging a very heavy, large black gym bag out of the villa and into the back of a car. When the police traced the car's details, it turned out to be a rental from a nearby car center, associated with an employee at the car center. Under the threat of being arrested, the employee revealed that this was his friend, Younghak, a resident in that building who he had agreed to help carry the suitcase. The specific address of this villa was inadvertently disclosed by several news channels, resulting in numerous images of the building circulating. Unfortunately for the neighbors, the building is very well documented online through various investigative shows and blogs. The police were unable to secure a warrant to search Younghak's residence after a few attempts until on October 8th, the police obtained Hayun's phone records and discovered that the last messages she sent were in a group chat with a friend that she was seen with. The girl she was with's name is Ayan, whose name is real. Typically, I wouldn't use a minor's real name in a case, and this has nothing to do with my personal opinions about their actions, but their name is publicly and legally available. I would never change how I present a case based on my feelings about a person's crimes. Moving on, Hayun had received messages from Ayan in a group text, who was an elementary school friend who she hadn't spoken to in a few years. Ayan and her exchanged messages, catching up with one another, and spoke on the phone a few times over the days prior to her disappearance. They talked about how their friendship ended once they moved to middle school. Hayun was the only person in the group text to even respond to Ayan, and the two girls decided to hang out. The rest of their conversations were done over phone calls, but the police were able to determine that Ayan was Younghak's daughter, which is why she arrived at this villa apartment. The police were suspicious of Ayun's father, Younghak, and got his mobile records and access to his phone contents. The contents they found in his phone suggested that this case would go a lot deeper than a missing teenage girl. They were looking at dozens of videos of sexual content filmed by Younghak without context for consent that implied a connection to prostitution. 2 days after Hayun was reported missing, Younghak had posted a video on YouTube in his car driving on the freeway while crying on October 2nd, 2017 at 3 p.m. The video was a little over 7 minutes long. In this video, Younghak looks between the camera and the road while crying and lamentingly mumbles, "Honey, I should have followed you a long time ago," referring to his wife, Chemi-san, who had passed away a few weeks prior. He continues, "But things got really complicated today. I had prepared some medicine, but they came in and took it while they were ordering hamburgers." The they he refers to is his daughter and Hayun, implying that he had prepared to take some medicine that would end his life, but while he was out of the room, Hayun came in and drank it or took it unknowingly. By the time the police saw the CCTV on October 2nd, Hayun was already dead. They had no chance of rescuing her. He continued to address his late wife in the video. "Only we know how you and I fell in love and lived together. The police and prosecution doesn't listen. It's because nobody believes us. It's right for me and our daughter to follow you." Younghak then addresses everyone watching the video, saying, "You can make an arrest, but the police didn't answer the phone because they were sleeping. You should all know that my wife died that day, wandering alone after hearing that she might be pregnant. This is the law in the country. The reason why my wife died was because she was sexually assaulted. There was a missing 14-year-old girl who he just admitted to poisoning, potentially killing, and he's now implying that his wife's death was due to the police's reaction to his wife being sexually assaulted. This case became so complicated, it was difficult to figure out where to start. He continued to talk in the video, but as the video went on, his sentences just became more jumbled and his rambling turned into gibberish. He continued the video with, "A child unexpectedly lost her life because of us. I sent my wife to another man, and until now, I'm just touching my wife's underwear and watching videos I used to watch with my wife. Before she died, my wife said to me, I wore my wedding ring on my last day to prove my love. I made dinner before I did it." He was referring to the suicide note that she supposedly left. We'll get to that later. He ended the video, "If I can before I die, I'll say more. Thank you, everyone." He uploaded the video to YouTube and his social media accounts alongside a picture of his late wife, Mi-sun, with the caption, "I'm going to the East Coast now because I miss my dead wife." In the midst of all of this was Hayun's bereaved family, who saw this video along with everyone else. They were still desperately hoping to find Hayun and make sure she was alright. Her family listened as Younghak admitted to poisoning and killing Hayun, alongside the public, who rushed to cover the story. The predatory side of true crime and investigative journalism showed its teeth as the family was bombarded with journalists at their home, the hair salon owned by Hayun's mother, and everywhere Hayun frequented, like school, after-school programs, and relatives' homes. The family was afraid to go to work, go to her hair salon, for weeks because of the publicity. Why was this case so heavily publicized? And why did it spread so widely, whereas other true crime cases are kept relatively quiet? It all had to do with Younghak. Younghak was nothing of a celebrity, but he had been on television a few times prior. He also had a book published a few years prior to this titled Agum ni Appai Hengbok, which translates to Molar, Father's Happiness. The police were trying to find the whereabouts of both Younghak and his 14-year-old daughter Ayun. They were recognized and found at a motel in Dobanggu after moving from motel to motel to avoid being caught. As the police came to the motel room, Younghak had prepared a large amount of sleeping pills that he attempted to swallow and commit suicide with his daughter. The two received emergency medical treatment and after receiving medical care, were not injured from the attempt. However, while receiving medical treatment, a post was made on a website ran by Younghak. A very long letter was posted online to his daughter. However, it was manually uploaded while Younghak was still unconscious at the hospital. It wasn't possible for him to have uploaded a suicide letter while unconscious, and the details of the letter didn't include that he would have committed suicide with his daughter Ayun. There seemed to be someone cooperating with Younghak to help him commit suicide or give him an alibi. The police gained access to Younghak's computer and phone and were able to discover that Younghak's older brother had posted the letter because he was asked to post it at a certain time because Younghak said he was in a quote-unquote difficult situation. After leaving the hospital, Younghak didn't waste any time before he confessed to causing the death of Hayun and hiding her body. He stuck to his story that she died accidentally and that he knew the police wouldn't understand the situation with his wife. He saw no other choice than to end his own life with his daughter. Ayun didn't wake up from her medically induced coma until a few days later after more medical treatment. The recollection of events that the father and daughter told the police didn't match up very well, but it was clear that they had practiced what they would say. To understand this mess of a story, we need to go back to the very start. This particular case, like many others, is significantly shaped by the circumstances that Younghak faced in his life and the decisions that he took. So it's crucial to delve into the background to comprehend the situation thoroughly. Who was Younghak? Younghak developed a health condition at the age of 9 in 1991 that had a profound impact on his well-being. Malignant tumors started to form on his jaw, where it met his teeth and jawbone. Doctors were shocked by the disease that was causing these tumors to rapidly grow in his face. His face slowly became distorted, and he was unable to eat normally. The disease was causing tumors to grow between his facial bones and tooth molds. They started to spread throughout his body, which caused him a lot of pain. He was bullied heavily for his appearance because of the tumors, and later that year, at age 9, he attempted suicide by taking 3 days' worth of cold medicine. His mother was the one who would save his life. Later that year, he also received medical treatment that he needed, 5 surgeries. The tumors were gone after these surgeries, and he was able to live tumor-free and without any visible scars on his face. However, he was left with only 1 molar tooth. The disease responsible for these malignant tumors is called gigantiform cementoma, which was identified in the 70s. The first documented case of this condition was Younghak. Presently, fewer than 20 individuals are known to have this disease. As he grew up, he was ostracized by his peers and often acted out violently because of this. He had difficulty making friends and often got into fights with other students. He found power in being a bully, and his first disciplinary action he faced at school was following an incident in his second year of middle school at the age of 14 that involved him arriving to class with blood on his clothes. When asked about what happened, he loudly began to brag and laugh that he had sexually assaulted a random student he saw when walking past. He laughed to his classmates about attacking the student, but no help was sent for the victim. The teacher heard about this incident later and went to the principal, attempting to expel Younghak because of his abhorrent actions. But the principal thought that this was not grounds for expulsion, and Younghak was given a very minor punishment like detention. Other students said that Younghak claimed to have participated in group sexual assault of another student as well. When the principal found out about this incident as well, it was also not appropriately punished. The victims did not come forward, which may not have even affected the principal's decision. It's not uncommon for school to try to silently solve problems or hide problems to avoid the school losing face or status. From what is said about Younghak and from what he has claimed, he was a serial rapist by the time he left middle school. His predatory and violent behaviors were encouraged by his group of friends, who together performed these heinous actions. A classmate who was interviewed stated that they knew of at least 3 girls in their grade who had been sexually assaulted by Younghak and his friends. They also stated that there was an elementary school student that he had sexually assaulted after luring her away with the promise of snacks. Where was the justice for these girls? We don't have answers because, unfortunately, these girls did not come forward, or no one in their lives fought for them. Crimes that take place within schools are not dealt with by the police usually. These crimes are dealt with by the school, which would suffer too much if they actually punish these crimes, because that would mean admitting these crimes happened under their noses. At this time, schools were under no obligation to report any student crimes to the police, and they weren't required to investigate incidents. And what of his parents? His father was seldom home because he was a wealthy businessman, and his mother, according to Younghak, was mentally unstable and unloving. He was frequently left unsupervised, and he developed a sense of superiority due to his family's affluence. However, this perception of power started to waver when he was unable to graduate from middle school due to his bad grades and excessive absences. Rumors started to spread around school that he had an intellectual disability, which possibly stemmed from the lisp he had due to his missing teeth. In reality, Younghak lacked education because of the negative influences and missing more than a third of the school year. Ultimately, the principal did not want issues with the family and covered up all of his records and excused his absences to allow him to graduate. Whether it was pressure from his family, the principal's abuse of authority, or other factors, the constant leniency and permissiveness of Younghak's actions only served to encourage him to continue down the path he was on. Then, his mother decided to leave the family and divorce his father as the father's business began to fail. Younghak's family was no longer wealthy. So, in 2000, when Younghak was 18, he started working a part-time job to support himself. But he was living off of minimum wage, much unlike what he was used to when he was growing up. As he worked at a sushi restaurant, he met Misun. He met Misun when she was only 14 years old. With his prior record of choosing victims based off of his power over them, with age being a factor, it isn't a stretch to assume he was interested in Misun because she was so much younger than him. He had targeted elementary students when he was in middle school. Misun's friend spoke to the Korean investigative journalism show Unanswered Questions, stating that their relationship was extremely coercive. Misun's sister also said that she tried to keep in contact with her sister, but all of her attempts were blocked by Younghak, who began to isolate her immediately after they had their daughter in 2003. Misun was 17 when she had their daughter Ayun on August 26, 2003. Misun's sister told journalists that her sister was forced to get pregnant and then forced into marriage 2 years later in 2005. But Ayun was born and she was healthy until at 6 months, they noticed large growths on her jawline that indicated that she too had gigantiform cementoma like her father did. She would undergo multiple surgeries much like her father did when he was a child. However, without wealthy parents meant the medical costs were much more of a burden. Korean healthcare would cover much of the cost, but there is much more to caring for a 6-month-old baby undergoing invasive surgery than just the medical bills, so Younghak and Misun turned to raising donations to afford her treatments. When Ayun was 2 years old in 2005, the family appeared on TV for the first time. They were featured on an MBC Korea broadcast where Younghak became known as the Molar dad or Molar daddy. Korea began to call Younghak Darbabo, or literally daughter's fool, a father so in love with his daughter that he acts like a fool. It's a term of endearment, and there's a similar one in other countries as well. There's also terms for sons as well. It's a very prideful parent who would have their child as their phone background or in their wallet and show it to strangers. In normal circumstances, we would just call this a good father. I found an article written in November 2006 in which, prior to any of this case happening, the family was looked at sympathetically. The family spoke often to reporters about Ayun's condition. Chemi-san said that she hated to see her daughter suffer every night to breathe properly because of her facial deformities. In this interview, Ayun had undergone 2 of her surgeries in the past December and April, which lasted over 9 hours each, and removed tumors the size of 2 adult fists each. Her surgeries were costing the family over 25 million won each time, which is close to $19,000. At only 3 years old, only 35% of Ayun's facial bones remained. Younghak told reporters that he made brochures titled Molar that he handed out every day, because despite him and his daughter being the only 2 people in all of Korea to ever have this disease, he told reporters that they only received 170,000 won each month in support from the government, which is around $125. Younghak was becoming very interested in the fame he was receiving for being such a loving and caring father that he wrote a book titled Molar Daddy's Happiness. The story tells of Younghak suffering as a child and suddenly becoming poor when his mother left their family and his father's business failed. His story really reads like a hero's journey with himself as the hero. The highest point in his life was when he met his wife and they had their daughter. But then their life fell apart when discovering that she would also be sick. There's a point in the book that's supposed to be a tearjerker when he writes about buying dinner for his family, unable to purchase the more delicious fried chicken with seasonings and sauce because it would cost 500 won more, or roughly about 35 cents. But we know that they actually lived quite comfortably now with the income the father made from his disability income that he received for his rare disease. He made a good amount over minimum wage. Government income wasn't his only income though. He was also getting donations and assistance from people all over the world. But reality was much different than he was writing it to be. Younghak had indeed been receiving a monthly allowance from the government for his rare disability, but not the measly $125 a month that he said he'd been getting. He was receiving around 2.6 million won a month from the government, or close to 2,000 US dollars. His daughter would also receive this money to her parents to support her. To put it into perspective, this is more than a full-time EFL teacher usually makes in their first few years. This was a base income and didn't include the large amounts of donations that they received from being on multiple television shows, selling a book, and even traveling to America to talk about their rare disease. They talked about financial difficulties on television, while Younghak was counting his cash off camera. Reading the book now, it may feel disgusting and hypocritical to see such tender words towards his family on the page when he would commit such heinous acts later towards his family. But in reality, he didn't write the book at all. The ghostwriter was a man who stated he put his entire heart into the book because he imagined taking care of his own child. So the sincerity of the book wasn't Younghak's at all, but a man who had incredible empathy for the family. The revision of his violent and abusive past would only fuel the desire again for power. In his book, he lied about his own condition, garnishing sympathy for himself. He claimed to also suffer from epilepsy, dementia, and stated that he was still terminally ill and needed to ensure Ah-young would have enough money to support herself if he died. He would then link Ah-young's own personal bank account number at the end of news articles, on television, and even at his book signings. Younghak was collecting checks as he performed morality and collected sympathy. Soon after his book was published, he went on a bicycle ride across the country to raise money for Ah-young. He had a unique situation where the money didn't need to benefit other victims of the disease or a nonprofit because his daughter was essentially the only person at the time with the disease, at least in Korea. Younghak and Ah-young also flew to Koreatown in Los Angeles, California, where he donned traditional Korean doll masks called tar. Korea has a very rich history of masked theater and storytelling. The two most recognizable masks being Hahue mask, carved to change expressions depending on the angle you see them from. If you were to imagine a Korean mask, or see a typical definition of a Korean mask, then you would probably imagine a young mantar, the nobleman's mask, or 남사당 돋보이기, a masked theater dance that is meant to be comical and fun in nature. It's incredibly fun to watch, and I recommend going to the Andong Mask Festival if you ever come to Korea in the fall. All while Younghak is playing the daughter's fool to the public, they had no idea that Younghak had 11 criminal convictions, including theft and home invasion. This didn't include the countless sexual assaults he committed even before the age of 19. He had also spent over $20,000 of the donation money tattooing his entire body in a style synonymous with Korean gangsters to appear more strong and intimidating. He often would post pictures of himself fully nude online asking for young girlfriends, despite being married with a child. I obviously am not insinuating that tattoos have any relation to a person's likeliness to commit crime, but the tattoos that he got in particularly are heavily influenced by Japanese gangs like the Yakuza, when Japan colonized Korea and gangs offered people a way to rebel against the government. These tattoos also exempt you from mandatory military service, which is also a motivating factor for recruitment into gangs. Whatever Younghak's reasoning, he clearly got tattoos that replicated famous gang tattoos. He'd also began collecting expensive cars that he illegally altered and resold. As the television appearances slowed down and Ah-young's surgeries were done, they began to live a much more private life. Younghak's online presence became much more private, and they didn't go on interview shows any longer. Ah-young's condition was also under control, and she would live a relatively normal and healthy life like her father was able to. Younghak, Misun, and Ah-young really appeared to have the most caring and loving family, but behind doors, Younghak's childhood violence, aggression, and disregard for others was here to stay. Misun faced the brunt of this violence. We know that their marriage started with extreme controlling and abusive behavior, but Misun was never able to tell her story. The first abuse that family members and friends would see started after all of the publicity started to quiet down. When going out, Younghak would threaten Misun with violence if she looked at or spoke to any other man, including waiters, cashiers, or even Younghak's friends. Younghak's domestic abuse started as coercive control, which is a pattern of assault, threats, humiliation, and intimidation intended to harm, punish, or frighten someone. He would do just that. He met Misun when she was young, and children are naive to the ways adults can manipulate. Coercive control abusers often isolate their victims from support. Misun's family and sister said that they would go weeks without hearing from her, and they were never allowed to visit the home. home. This abuse can escalate to monitoring your time and actions, taking control over your actions, like what you can say, do, wear, or see. They can emotionally degrade, humiliate, or dehumanize their victim. And all of this affects someone so overwhelmingly that it's impossible to see a way out of it. Mi-sun was told she couldn't look at other men, couldn't laugh or flirt with other men, which meant she couldn't do anything Younghak believed was flirting. She couldn't show her body and had to cover herself up. She was also never allowed out of the house after 8 p.m. Mi-sun never ever had a chance to live a life of her own. It seems that Younghak may have chosen her because she had already faced a lot of difficulty in her life prior to meeting him. Mi-sun was orphaned as a child and never was taken in by family, so she lived alone by supporting herself as early as she could. She went to school and worked part-time in middle school to give herself a better life until she met Younghak at 14, and he convinced her to drop out of school. After meeting Younghak, she moved in with him, and when she was 17, she gave birth to Hayun. The two were not legally married until 2005 when she was 19. Domestic abuse started very early in their relationship. After giving birth, the doctor who delivered the baby and took care of Mi-sun noted in her records that he believed she was a victim of domestic violence and that her relationship with the father appeared to be estranged. There wasn't much they could do beyond just recording their observations, or perhaps they just didn't want to get involved. Later, sometime between 2010 and 2017, neighbors noticed that Mi-sun often was yelled at, scolded, or hit for getting out of the car first or walking ahead of Younghak. They said they'd never seen her smile before and often worried about her, but it isn't Korean culture to get involved. When Younghak began tattooing his body, neighbors noticed that Mi-sun also appeared to have tattoos. Extremely surprising, shocking tattoos that would be unthinkable for someone to want to get on themselves. Mi-sun had tattoos on her upper arms, thighs, back, and later in her autopsy it was also discovered her genital area as well. Things such as, don't talk to other men, don't go out after 8, don't look at other men, and Younghak's name. There were also derogatory phrases for women tattooed on her body. These weren't small tattoos either. Each of these was about the size of an A4 piece of paper. Large prints of text all over her body. And they weren't professionally done. Younghak had purchased a tattoo machine to perform these tattoos on her whenever he felt like abusing or punishing her. Later, Younghak forced Mi-sun to get breast enlargement surgery to appease him. In 2017, Mi-sun is now 31, Hayun is 14, and Younghak is 35. Hayun is living a relatively healthy life but has some headgear for her teeth development. On September 5th, 2017, paramedics arrived to the family's villa apartment around midnight. They'd received a call that a person had fallen from the 5th floor window. The person who fell was Mi-sun. By the time paramedics arrived, she was no longer breathing. They started resuscitating efforts for 4 minutes, but Mi-sun was rushed to the hospital and passed away from her injuries. 4 days prior, on September 1st, Mi-sun left their home and went to the Jungnang Police Station and filed a complaint. The complaint, however, was not against her husband. Actually, the complaint was filed against Younghak's father. The complaint said, I have been continuously sexually assaulted by my father-in-law for 8 years since 2009. In 2009, Younghak and Hayun had gone to America to raise money for her surgeries, and Younghak made his wife stay with the father so that she could be watched. She says this is when the sexual abuse began, and it would continue to happen anytime she visited the father-in-law's home. The police took the complaint, but before they could even begin investigating, Younghak found out. He told his wife, I'll help you with the problem. He suggested setting up a camera in her room and inviting the father-in-law over. When he ultimately would sexually assault her again, they would have proof for the police. Neighbors claim that they heard the couple having a very loud argument around this time, but this wasn't unusual for them. The next day, on September 5th, was when Mi-sun fell from the 5th floor apartment window to her death. Their apartment is covered by multiple CCTV angles due to the businesses in the area, and experts have analyzed every second of the footage. The cameras do not point at the apartment windows for privacy, but do see up to the 2nd floor of the building. According to the police, her autopsy report analysis, Mi-sun was struck on the head prior to her fall with a blunt object. She was bleeding from her forehead and fell holding a cloth she had used to stop the bleeding. Traces of her blood were found on the outside of the apartment window. Younghak told the police that she was cleaning the bathroom and fell from the bathroom window. Their bathroom window is identical to my apartment's window, which a person could only squeeze through barely. It's a sliding window that only opens halfway because the 2 vertical rectangular glass panes open by sliding on top of each other. Just a typical sliding window. These windows are about the size of a shoebox because they're in your bathroom just for letting the steam out. However, next to the bathroom window was Ayun's bedroom window, which is much larger, about 4 times larger than the bathroom window, and closer to the apartment floor. The bathroom window is about 4.5 feet off the ground. Getting onto the ledge of that window would require a ladder or a very tall chair for a woman of average height. In 2018, Unanswered Questions, the Korean investigative television series, recreated the window and accurate size and height from the bathroom floor to see if a woman Mi-sun's height could have climbed up to the window and jumped out of it. It was concluded that it would be almost impossible to have gone through the narrow bathroom window and fall out of the window, away from the building. When they visited the villa to confirm, they noticed something that the police hadn't. Below the daughter's window is a sign for a business on the first floor. The top of the sign has a dent with traces of blood that likely came from Mi-sun's body hitting the sign as she fell. However, the police would conclude they didn't believe she fell from the daughter's bedroom and believed that she did fall from the bathroom window. An eyewitness who saw Mi-sun falling noticed that her shirt was pulled over her head and her pants were slightly pulled down. After she hit the ground, the first thing neighbors and eyewitnesses saw was Younghak come down from the apartment and fixed her clothing and then walked away. People at the scene had no idea that he was her husband because he just fixed her clothes, moved away from her body, and walked around looking at his phone. He was acting more calmly than the neighbors coming to help her. He looked at his dying wife as if he was just waiting for her to get up. In CCTV footage that is censored, you can see the second the loud sound of Mi-sun hitting the ground is heard. 3 neighbors who were talking outside suddenly sprint to help. They don't hesitate to call 119, and then Younghak and Ayun come down and check on her. Younghak fixes her clothes and Ayun stands looking down on her mother. Younghak shakes Mi-sun's shoulders and then stops moments later when he realizes she isn't conscious. Ayun starts using her phone and Younghak takes it from her and they move aside. They look at her for a moment before moving aside when the ambulance arrives. As CPR is started by the paramedics, Younghak makes a phone call and Ayun walks away. Neither of the two are seen crying, panicking, or even caring about the situation. The paramedics didn't even know that Younghak was family and left without him. Younghak was still on the phone looking away from the scene when the ambulance drives off. They thought he was just a neighbor. As soon as the night turned to morning, Younghak's older brother shows up at their house and starts cleaning the blood off the ground outside with bleach. And soon, Younghak and Ayun come out and help him clean the ground. As they clean, they keep looking up at the villa windows as if trying to see if there's any more blood, perhaps for cleaning or for erasing evidence. The police interrogated Younghak about the incident, and when asked about the wound on Mi-sun's head, Younghak admitted to hitting his wife because he said she was cheating on him with his father for the last 8 years. He also believed that their relationship was consensual, and Mi-sun said she might have been pregnant by his father. Ayun was also questioned, but she said she didn't know her mother had fallen until her father yelled to go outside because she was in her bedroom, which gave the police more reason to think Mi-sun didn't fall from the daughter's bedroom, but as we know now, she might have been a lying witness. A few days later, Younghak presented the police with Mi-sun's suicide note. He said that he had found it under their bed when he returned to the apartment. It was 4 pages typed on A4 paper. Keep in mind, the police checked it for DNA, and Mi-sun's fingerprints were nowhere on this paper. The will's contents were described as pornographic in nature and didn't appear to have been written by someone who was planning to kill themselves. The will included graphic sexual information about Mi-sun pleasing her husband and about her stepfather's sexual assault. The will is not public, but it also was determined to have been fake by the detectives later in October 2017. In Mi-sun's autopsy, they discovered the extent of her tattoos, bruises on her body, and the cut on her forehead from Younghak hitting her, and evidence that she had engaged in sexual activity earlier that day. The semen present was her father-in-law's, who said that their relationship was consensual. Later, he said that Mi-sun had been the one who seduced him, and he couldn't resist her. However, when she reported him to the police earlier, she had told the officers that her father-in-law had a shotgun in his home and had used it to threaten her. Police confirmed the father-in-law did indeed have multiple guns, however, he did have a permit for these. The case against the stepfather was dismissed shortly after the investigating officers were denied an arrest warrant 3 times for the reason that there was no evidence that the sex was not consensual, a case of misjustice. After the case was dismissed, Younghak continued to make posts online about how sad he was that his wife wouldn't get justice and that he was in mourning. He posted pictures online with his wife's framed photo from her funeral and a small memorial altar that he had made for her. Later, he would also share pictures of him and her body at the morgue uncensored. These have thankfully been removed from the internet. CCTV footage from prior to Misun's alleged suicide show her walking home about an hour prior to her death. Police had asked neighbors and people in the area if they had seen her, which led them to learn a lot more about the case than they had anticipated. Neighbors said that this house was known as a house for prostitution. Several women were coming in and out of the villa at all hours of the day, and food was often ordered for 6 or more people. Later, following the disappearance and death of Hayun, the police would obtain Younghak's computer and phone and discover dozens and dozens of videos of Younghak acting as a pimp for several women, including his own wife. These videos, whether consensually obtained or not, were uploaded to adult sites, which is illegal in Korea. Pornography has been illegal in South Korea since 2008. The police then suspected that Misun's suicide or murder was potentially due to her being sold to her stepfather and many other men by Younghak. This led the police down the rabbit hole into Younghak's online habit. He'd often arrange sex trafficking for minors on X, formerly known as Twitter. In the days following Misun's death, Younghak began posting on adult chatting sites looking for women who wanted to date him, move into the spare bedroom, or have casual sex. He went to the barber, got cleaned up, and started posting videos again for sympathy on his daughter's donation website. He then sent his wife's ashes to her family. This is a small note when recording. I noticed that the pseudonym I chose for the victim, Hayun, is very similar to the perpetrator's name, Ayun. So when I'm talking about both of them here, I'm going to try my best to enunciate very strongly so that you understand. But that was a little oversight on my part. But I'm already 5 hours into recording, so please bear with me. On September 30th, 2017, at 12:20 p.m., Hayun arrived to the villa after agreeing to meet up with Ayun. Ayun suggested that they go to a DVD bong together to play games and watch movies. Younghak had told Ayun the idea of enticing Hayun in by suggesting that they watch a movie of their favorite idols together. However, when Hayun called her mom to ask for permission, her mom said no. DVD bongs aren't unsafe, but it's not untypical for a mom to want her daughter not to go to a private, unsupervised cafe with someone she doesn't know. So Hayun and Ayun decided to go to Ayun's house. Hayun did not tell her mom she would be going to the apartment. When Hayun arrived, Ayun gave her some pills, telling her that they were nutritional supplements that she had gotten from the doctor and that they were super good for girls their age and that she could just have them for free. They drank some vitamin drinks from the convenience store, and Hayun took some of the pills, unknowing that these were actually narcotic sleeping pills called Zolpidem that was prescribed to Younghak who had insomnia. Hayun was given much more than the recommended dosage. After she took the medication, Ayun waited for her friend to fall asleep before she called for her father and then left the house at 3:40 p.m. Younghak, now alone with Hayun, he sexually assaulted her with various adult sex aids that he had around the house for his sex trafficking business. Because Younghak had erectile dysfunction, Younghak left the house to go get his daughter at 7:48 p.m. after sexually assaulting Hayun multiple times. About 4 hours later, they returned home at 8:14 p.m. So Hayun's been unconscious for about 4 hours now. At 10:28 p.m. that night, Ayun turned Hayun's phone back on and answered a call from her mother. Hayun's mother asked, "Where are you? Where did you go? What's going on?" And Ayun pretended to be Hayun and said, "I'm just with my friend. We went to our elementary school to catch up." And then she has hung up on the mother. It was after this that Hayun's mother decided to go to the police. She knew that Ayun was not her daughter. Hayun had now been unconscious for 7 hours. At 11:53 a.m. the next morning, October 1st, Ayun left the house again, and Hayun was still unconscious until she returned at around 1:44 p.m. and found Hayun dead. While Ayun was out, Hayun woke up from the narcotic sleeping pills and began to scream and try to escape, which Younghak attacked her and began to strangle her until she died. Hayun had been overdosed until unconscious on narcotic sleeping medication for over 21 hours without food or water. 15 hours after killing Hayun, Younghak called his friend who worked at a nearby car rental service and put Hayun's body into a large black bag. The friend arrived and backed up the car to the entrance of the stairwell so Younghak could put the body into the car discreetly. Together, Younghak, Ayan, and the friend drove the body to the mountains and abandoned Hayun's body before Younghak would go on to film his fake crying videos admitting to Hayun's death on YouTube. The police asked Ayan why she brought Hayun to her father. She told police that her father had told her that since her mother had died, he needed someone to fill in for her. He told her that it was too expensive to order a wife from abroad, and that if any of her friends came from bad homes or didn't like their parents, that they would make a good candidate. While Younghak doesn't have a high score on the psychopathy test, his score was a 25 out of 40, which 25 or higher shows signs of psychopathic tendencies. Criminal profiler Lee Joo-hyun stated that because Younghak's sexual desire was so high, and because he suffered from erectile dysfunction, which left him unable to fulfill those sexual desires, his aggression would continue to mount. When his wife passed away, he turned to other vulnerable targets, which included his daughter's friends. Children are easier to control in the eyes of a predator. Sergeant E does not believe Younghak to be a pedophile because the sexual obsession does not stem from the victim's age or body, but the need to control his victims. An outside expert, Lee Soo-jung, a professor of criminal psychology at Kyung University, said that the disability he had as a child made relationships with girls nearly impossible. Because he lacked confidence to approach girls, he turned to fantasies, and his distorted psychological characteristics sought to restore his self-esteem by overpowering, dominating, or controlling more vulnerable targets. According to Professor of Police Administration Oh Yoon-sung, it's most likely that Younghak was a situation child sexual abuser. A situation sex offender is a person whose situation is different from their usual habits, so the crime does not show a sexual preference, such as a pedophile would have. When understanding Ayan's upbringing, she was so dependent on her father without realizing it. She'd grown up being told that her father was the only person in the world who would understand her painful, disfiguring, and ostracizing disability, in their words. She felt grateful to her father for fundraising so wholeheartedly her entire childhood, and her father doted on her constantly. In her heart, she could not believe her father could ever be wrong. And to a 14-year-old girl, she was completely in a delusion that her father was absolute morality. She truly believed that if her father said he needed a replacement for her mother, that she needed to comply because her father was a good person who would only do this if it was absolutely necessary. Her brainwashing was similar to a child growing up in a cult. Despite knowing that certain actions are wrong, her brain couldn't comprehend that the person doing them was wrong. However, the police also knew that she was not always being forced, despite her actions being heavily influenced. A former friend of Ayan's told reporters that when she was in middle school with Ayan had invited her over, and when she was at their house, Younghak sexually and physically assaulted her. He threatened her to remain silent about the incident as well. The anonymous victim told reporters that Ayan knew her father was going to sexually assault her, and she helped her father. Other friends testified that when they visited Ayan's house, Younghak would abuse and yell at Misun in front of Ayan, and Ayan didn't appear to have any reaction or care about her mother's treatment. So was Ayan a victim of her father's conditioning, an accomplice, or both? Well, the prosecution had charges for Younghak of forcible molestation and murder. This did not include the wife's death. This was only for Hayun's death. Ayan was also charged with indecent assault and abandonment of a body. And the friend that helped them dispose of the body was charged with harboring a criminal. And then the older brother was also charged with aiding and abetting fraud. Because tied up in all of this, Younghak and his brother were faking traffic accidents and claiming the insurance money. On October 13th, Younghak spoke to reporters and apologized to Hayun and then began to cry, which Korean media largely called fake tears. He began talking about his wife's suicide. The point of his apology seemed to focus more on him wanting sympathy for his wife's death than giving an actual apology to the victim or her family. At the first trial, Younghak was accused of violating the Act on the Sexual Protection of Children and Adolescents, violating the Act on the Management of Narcotics, committing indecent assault, abandoning and concealing a corpse, violating the Act on Prostitution and Solicitation, violating the Special Act on Sexual Crimes, and violating the Act on Safety Management of Guns. Multiple guns were found in Younghak's home and car. Simply, he was being charged with sexual assault of a child, misuse of his narcotic sleeping medication, abandoning the body, murdering a child, soliciting prostitution, filming and creating pornography, and having illegal guns. Hayun was actually charged with enticement of a minor and abandonment of a corpse. She was only 15, but she could be charged with both of these crimes. At this trial, Younghak begged for a prison sentence, not a life sentence, because he says he only did this because he missed his wife and that the drugs his doctor prescribed him were causing him to hallucinate, so he didn't know what was going on. The public's response was incredibly scathing because they saw through his manipulative use of his wife's death. Hayun's trial finished first. She was sentenced to a term of 4 to 7 years for luring Hayun and abandoning her corpse under her father's orders. In Younghak's final words, he tried to apologize to the court, but it was revealed that he had told his daughter that she would receive a reduced sentence if they both cried. The court judged his crimes as perverted, sadistic, extremely inhumane, and cruel. The judge said, "This act was perverted and sadistic, trampling on the victim's basic human dignity and causing extreme sexual shame even from the perspective of an adult, let alone a victim that was 14 years old." Younghak was sentenced to life imprisonment without the chance of parole. Hayun has since been released from prison, however, it is unknown the date of her release because she was a minor. It's likely that she's also changed her name now. Hayun is 21 years as of 2024. Also following this case, the stepfather who habitually sexually assaulted Misun committed suicide by hanging himself in his greenhouse on October 25, 2017. There was no suicide note left at the scene, but some sources say a small note was later found that says, "Please clear my name." This case was widely publicized and very closely followed by the media because of Younghak's media presence due to his daughter's condition. However, this case also raised a lot of concerns about the police's care of missing children and domestic violence. First, when Misun's tattoos were seen by the police official stated, Younghak tattooed derogatory phrases on his wife because she wanted them. The wife wrote the phrases she wanted Younghak to tattoo on her genitals. The police officer blindly believed the false will that Younghak presented that stated she enjoyed being degraded and tattooed like this. Then concerns emerged that the police may have underestimated the missing victim's parents' report, leading to the tragic loss of life that might have been saved. Allegedly, the victim's mother provided Hayun's name, who mentioned planning to visit the daughter before her disappearance. However, the authorities dismissed it as a mere runaway case and started a thorough investigation over 24 hours after Hayun's mother reported her missing. After an inspection by the Seoul Metropolitan Police Agency at Jungnang Police Station, it was discovered that officials involved in the incident did not take action because they judged the case to be unimportant. They neglected reports and even responded apathetically to the family. Some officers were found to have been sleeping on the sofa during work hours. Following these findings of misconduct, disciplinary measures were initiated against 9 officers involved. In 2019, Hayun's family won a lawsuit against the district that they mishandled the case. The court stated that if the officers had been investigating immediately, they could have located her prior to her death. Therefore, the police's negligence was partly at fault for Hayun's death. I will conclude, in this case, it's crucial for adults, schools, or parents to intervene when children exhibit violent behaviors to prevent them from growing into violent adults. While we cannot definitively say that Younghak's violent tendencies could have been averted if the school principal had taken the teacher's concerns seriously, the potential positive impact would have made it a worthwhile effort. Addressing the root causes of such behavior early and providing effective intervention could have helped prevent future acts of violence. It's important to note that the responsibility for Hayun's death does not solely rest on Younghak, even though technically it does. The police's laziness and negligence resulted in Hayun not being found alive during the nearly 24 hours they had to locate her. Accountability is essential, and both institutions and individuals should be held responsible when the lives of others are at risk. Thank you for listening to Korean True Crime. I hope you enjoyed today's episode topic. If you would like to vote on future episode topics, join Korean True Crime on Patreon today. If you'd like to hear more, follow the show wherever you listen, and be sure to leave a review. If you'd like to see my show notes and sources, they are available for free on Patreon. 다음에 또 봐요. See you next time.